أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم وأما بعد فقد قال الله الحكيم في محكم كتابه أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ذلك الذي يبشر الله عباده الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات قل لا أسألكم عليه أجرا إلا المودة في القربى ومن يقترف حسنة نزد له فيها حسنا إن الله غفور شكور. Such is the good news that Allah gives to His servants who have faith and do righteous deeds. Say, I do not ask you any reward for it except the love of my relatives. Whoever performs a good deed, we shall enhance its goodness for him. Indeed, Allah is all forgiving, all appreciative. First and most of all, jami'an, salamun alaykum. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept all of your great a'mal, inshallah, your majalis, your commemoration and mourning for Imam al-Hussein, as simple actions as putting up and wearing the black attire as a signs of mourning and sorrow and grief in this month of Muharram, all the way to holding up different majalis on contribution and support that you show to raise the name and the flag of Imam al-Hussein, and give us the tawfiq to continue walking the path of Imam al-Hussein and his followers, including the ziyarat of Imam al-Hussein and his shafa in this dunya and hereafter, by reciting aloud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And let us express our deepest and most sincere of condolences to the heart of Imam of Time, Hazrat Sahib al-Asr wa Zaman, Ajjalallah ta'ala farajahu sharif, by your second of salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And let's remember all of the marhumin and marhumat, and let's include them inshallah in the sawab of this majalis upon the acceptance by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by reciting your third salawat followed by Surah Al-Fatiha. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. We're thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for giving us this bounty, this blessing, this rahmah, to be able to gather around under this tent and this flag and this banner with the beautiful name of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salatu wassalam, Sayyid al-Shuhada. So as we started to talk about the main theme of the discussions that inshallah we're going to have for the following nights, which falls within the category of love of Imam al-Hussein. I started by giving some of the prerequisites of this topic, meaning that before we actually get to the main topic, we have to understand our whereabouts. And along the same matter, we have to understand what is the purpose that we are living. It may sound like a simple, question, but at the same time, when we look around ourselves, we see that people, and mashallah, over 7 billion people are living on this planet Earth, right? At the same time, it seems like everybody's running and running and running after what we called, the dunya. So how is it possible for simple stuff, let's say, objectives and simple purpose of life, but at the same time we see that the majority are going sideways? As the Quran says, وَأَكْثَرُهُمْ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ وَأَكْثَرُهُمْ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ. So when it comes to the majority, even the Quran mentions the very same thing, that majority by itself cannot become the criterion of the truth. So if that's the case, me as an individual, I cannot just take it for granted and say by default, I'm walking on the right path. No, I have to investigate it. I have to do a further analysis. I have to do a little bit more research. I have to come to my senses again and to see whether the path that I have chosen, whether the practices that I have chosen, whether the faith or the belief that I have picked or I have been following, is this something that I'm mainly following because I was raised this way, or no, am I actually following the path of the truth? Recite the salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So if it's possible for the brothers to move a little bit forward as the newcomers come in, they would have enough space in the back by reciting a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. And as I mentioned last night, as you do make a move, make the intention, qurbatan ilallah, and try to get in the habit of being able to make a deal with the person that we have gathered around to commemorate and mourn for. Not to do it for the sake of anything else, but only and only and only for the sake of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salatu wassalam. Because when it comes to this, I would like to call it system of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, it is something that goes way beyond any form of rational thinking or rational, let's say, business mentality. Business mentality, we have give and takes. We invest, we get something back. There's always a matter of the interest rate. How much do I gain back from the amount of, let's say, money or capital or time that I invest in? But when it comes to the system of Imam al-Hussein, when it comes to the system of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, these goes so far beyond any rational reasoning, as if there is absolutely no way of understanding how does it work, let alone receiving what it gives us. So a lot of times when I see these boxes that says donation, I get a little bit offended myself, because truly speaking is not donation, it's actually investment. Better to say it's not even investment. What's the better word to use? Is cashing out. It's literally taking the rewards as we drop whatever money that we put in. And I'm sure you have heard of the beautiful narrations by Nabi Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, in which he had slaughtered a sheep and he was giving the different parts of the sheep for the Muslimin and Muslimat, to the neighbors and to the Mu'mineen and Mu'minat, and he kept on giving away and giving away and giving away until there was nothing left except for the part of it, apparently the head and the neck of the sheep. Everything else was given on the path of Allah. So one of the close ones over there, she made this comment that, O Rasulullah, you gave everything away except the head and the neck of the sheep. Immediately, and I mean immediately, Nabi Rasulullah did not hesitate. He responded back to her that it's actually the exact opposite. All that exists is the entire sheep, and what's missing is only the head and the neck. So when we say the box of donation, maybe a good idea. Change the title. It's a box of cashing out. It's a box of withdraw, actually. It's a box of withdraw from the divine bank, not the human bank. The human bank, what's the maximum interest rate that we can get? Is it 1%, 2%? I don't know what's the maximum. Let's say 3%, right? What's the divine bank? What's the interest that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us? Is it 1% or at least 10%, right? If you take one step, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes 10 steps. Now, if we bring that within the system of Imam al-Hussein, is it still a ratio of 1 to 10, even if you want to think about it mathematically? I'll give you one example. This alim who was living in the city of Najaf, he narrates this story, very common story. You may actually have heard of it, but for the sake of the argument, it's good to review it. He said, every day I had to walk from my house to the holy shrine of Amir al-Mu'mineen for my studies. It happened that one of the neighbors that I had, who was on my pathway as I was going towards the shrine, he was a disbeliever. He was not believing in the topic of vilayat. So every morning as I passed, from the front of his house, he would come out and he would start mocking me as I would pass or pass his house. And every day on the afternoon as I was returning to my home, he would come out and do the same thing because he knew my schedule. It's like, where are you going? You're going back to the same thing. And he was using a very foul language. So day after day, day after day, day after day, I didn't say anything. I said, okay, for the love of Imam al-Hussein, for the love of Amir al-Mu'mineen, let's deal with it. Didn't say anything until a couple of months later. One day, I had a very bad day already. As I was going back home, he came out again on the same, regular schedule, and he started using the very same mockery against me. This time, he hit me pretty bad. I turned around to say something back to him, but then again, I said, maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, maybe there is a wisdom, maybe, there is a reason for all of this. I didn't say anything. I kept it to myself, but I became extremely upset. So instead of going back to home, I turned around. I went back to the shrine of Amir al-Mu'mineen once more. And I was so upset, and I was so sad from within that the minute I entered the haram of Amir al-Mu'mineen, I couldn't stop crying. I just went on and I hold on to the dharih of Amir al-Mu'mineen. I started crying and crying and crying so hard until I didn't realize what happened, but I had this vision, I had this mushahada. I saw Amir al-Mu'mineen and I started talking to him. MashaAllah to that, right? And I asked him, oh Amir al-Mu'mineen, you are Haydar Karrar. You are the one that has done. I started using the virtues of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Then I raised the question, how come this fella, and every day, not only me, but every single person, every single Zahir that goes by his house, he comes and he starts, starts to mock them. He starts to make fun at them. How come you don't do anything about him? It has been a question for me for such a long time. Amir al-Mu'mineen turned around and told me, forget about him for the sake of us. I was trying to, but I couldn't because I have been doing it for such a long time, but I couldn't keep it up. So I kept repeating my question, why and why and why. Finally, Amir al-Mu'mineen answered my question. He said, all of this patience that you see that we have with him is for one simple act. Years ago, not recently, years ago, one day as he was going, for his business, as he was walking by the side of the Furat river, as he saw the water of Furat flowing, he looked, he pondered for 1 second, and one small tear of one small drop of tear came down from his eyes, saying, "O Furat, how can you be flowing here when the son of Nabi Rasulullah was killed thirsty about a couple of yards away from you?" One memory, one simple tear. For the sake of that one simple tear, we would not do anything against him. We have been giving him as much as he wants, and we have been giving him as much bounties as he wants. One tear. What's the ratio of that? One tear to a lifetime. It's not 1 to 10, yes? So the alim comes back to his senses, he goes back to home. Again, the guy comes out and he's mocking. Okay, so did you go and did you complain to your Mawla? What did he say? And he's trying to use his. He says, yes, I went and I did. And he gave you, he sent the message. He's like, yeah, what's the message? He was an unbeliever. He's like, do you remember that day? He's like, yeah, why? He's like, do you remember you went by the Furat river? He's like, yes. He's like, do you remember what came to your mind? He started thinking now. There was nobody around him at that time. He hasn't spoken of this to anybody. Then the alim started continuing the conversation. My Mawla told me to tell you on that day when you thought of the tragedy of Karbala, and when you saw the river and you saw the water flowing in the river of Furat, and you remembered the atash of Imam al-Hussein, and you shed one tear. For the sake of that one tear, they have forgiven about everything that you have done. When he heard this, he fell down. Nobody knew about this. It's like, how do you know? How is this possible? Transformed. One simple tear, transformation. Where can you find that? Within, again, the rational reasoning that we have, within the interest rate that we have, within the monetary terms that we have. One simple act, infinite result. That's how beautiful the system of Abu Abdullah al-Hussein works. So when the system is like this, then it becomes upon every single one of us to be able to somehow make that deal with Imam al-Hussein. Because no matter what we do, and that's why I said again, change the form of donation to withdraw, because it's not like Imam al-Hussein owes us something. Sometimes we may take this for granted again, and inshallah we don't have that within this community. Inshallah, those people who are like me, like if I do something good, then I expect something in return. This usually happens in the month of Ramadan a lot, and in the month of Muharram. If I do something good, let's say for a period of 10 days, for 30 days, I fast for 30 days, I come to a majlis for 10 days, no, even for one day, I expect something in return. And God forbid, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not grant what I want, everything goes under the question. Is there a God? If there is a God, how come He's not hearing me? I've been going to the masjids of Imam Hussein. I have been maintaining my prayer. I have been maintaining my salat and saum, my fasting. At the same time, when I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, nothing happens. Would that be a good reasoning? Again, let me give you a second story. There was this abid, this person who was known for worshipping, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not for 1 month, not for 10 days of Muharram, not even for 1 year. For how many years? For 70 consecutive years, he was worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. 70 consecutive years, that's a lifetime. All of these 70 years, he had not, he didn't have the, let's say, the expectation to even ask for something from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in return. Now something happens, after the 70 years, he finally comes up to the stage that he has a hajat, he has a request from Allah. So he does his prayer and he asks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that specific, let's say, request, whatever he wanted. Nothing happens. He prays again, nothing happens. He prays again, nothing happens. So if I was in his shoes, what would I have done? After 70 years, what happens if you work for a company for 70 years and you would not get a single, dollar from that company? What would you do? Would you continue going back to that company? What did this Abed do? He started doing repentance, opposite of people like me may think. Instead of saying, oh Allah, how come I've been praying for 70 years, how come you're not answering my call? Instead of having that stage of wanting something or say, oh Allah, you actually owe me something, he did the exact opposite. He made a repentance. And he was telling himself that if there was the slightest of good in me, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have granted, for example, my request. On that night, they gave him the message that this sense of, being regretful, this sense of repentance that you had when you did not receive what you asked from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, worth more than the 70 years of your worshipping. One instance worth more than 70 years of worshipping. Again, take this example and try to apply it to the very same analysis that we are used to on a daily basis. What's the ratio? So when it comes to this matter of divine, let's say, system, this matter of a spiritual path, it's not a matter of let's say, if I have everything in order, then I will be guaranteed. No, there is no sense of assurance as we speak of. The only sense of assurance is, inshallah, when we find that stage of yaqeen, hatta atakal yaqeen. Not until then, we have to constantly, again, we have to be in the stage of going back and reviewing all of our actions, number one. Number two, making sure that we are following on the right path. We're not getting diverted. We're not going sidetracked. We're not getting we're not falling for our own delusions or assumptions. The Sirat al-Mustaqim, it is the direct path. At the same time, it is very narrow, meaning that we can easily become diverted from the Sirat al-Mustaqim. Why? So many different attractions. And actually one of the signs of the end times is that the dunya, the material, the mundane world, it starts to manifest all of his its beauty and his majesty. So all of the material values becomes the true values. That's how the shift starts to happen. People tend to race one another for the sake of the material bounties. So again, as a believer, inshallah, as a follower of the school of the Ahlul Bayt, we constantly have to have this sense of measurement, that which way am I going? Towards which direction am I walking? And am I getting closer or am I getting farther away? I usually look at myself and I say, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, alhamdulillah, has given me X amount of years, let's say 30, 40, 50 years. Okay, what do I have to show for all of these years of bounties that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to me? You know, there is a sign for it, right? If you write, you know, if the people like me, if you're like really ready for it, and if you say, okay, I have done something, I feel good about it, فَتَمَنَّوُا الْمَوْتِ. Right? Are we at that stage to be able to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for our, like, you know, end for our death? Meaning that we have reached that stage of certainty? No. So here what I'm saying is, like, when we go to the majlis of Imam Hussein, number one, make sure that, like, you know, as we enter the majlis, we put aside all of the expectation. It's not a matter of saying, okay, I'm going to go to the majlis of Imam al-Hussein to get shafa. I'm going to go to the majlis of Imam al-Hussein to get my du'as answered. I'm going to go to the majlis of Imam al-Hussein so that my family and my children will be protected. All of this will be given, but put aside the expectation. You know, in a sense, again, one of the urafa, he was asked this question that, like, when you go to the ziyarat, what do you ask from the imam? And it's interesting, those who have gone to ziyarat, they can probably confirm this. As you go to the ziyarat, any of the ziyarat, as you get close to the, you know, to the zarih where people pray, you know, one of the good things is sometimes to sit back and listen to how people pray. And mashallah, people pray beautifully. That's one of the joys of ziyarah, to see how people make that bond and connection with the heart of the imam. So just sit back and look. And actually, this was one of the akhlaqi, like, recommendation. One of the brothers had asked one of the scholars that, you know, sometimes I go to ziyarat, but I'm not in the mood of ziyarat. What should I do? You know, I'm not feeling like opening up the book and reciting a ziyarat or offering the salat. What should I do? You know, he told them it's simple. Just sit back and look at the golden dome. Look at the people. Look at the za'irin. Because by looking at their mood, you gain the mood, right? The reason that we do the majalis together. I may not be in a mood of like commemorating, but at the same time, within the majlis, mashallah, one brother, one sister, a lot of times the children, when they're in the mood, everybody else gets benefit from them. And as I've seen this myself, that a lot of times great scholars, they go and they sit where the children's, like, you know, sit. Why? Their soul is more pure. They're more likely to find that connection during the majlis because they have done less of the sinning. They're more, like, you know, accepting. They're more, like, you know, on the side of being capable of receiving that mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the majlis. So number one, take the children with ourselves. Number two, make sure that, like, you know, we attend their, like, you know, matters during the majlis. If they're not going to learn, like, you know, the etiquettes of the majlis in the majlis, where else are they going to be learning about this stuff? And number three, as we go to the majlis of Imam al-Hussein, make sure, again, we put aside all of the expectation and we make that sincere and, like, ikhlas within our intention. That only and only and only for the sake of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam, inshallah, will be attending the majlis. So that means, like, you know, again, get in the habit of dealing with Imam al-Hussein, not with the majlis, not with the brothers and sisters within the community, not with the matter of, like, okay, I'm going to do this, so you have to do this and you have to do that, and if you don't do this, then we're going to have a problem. No. Put all of this aside. It's a race. It's a race of how much we can expend and, like, you know, pretty much spend ourselves on the path of Imam al-Hussein. Why? Again, remember, it's not donation, it's withdrawal. If they tell you one day you can withdraw as much as you want from the banks, what's going to happen? That would be a good race, right? If the government, for it, you know, all of the governments, one day they call it a national day of withdrawal. And they say on this day there are no limits. You can withdraw as much as you want from the entire bank. It's not from your own personal bank. As much as you want. Then what's going to happen? People will be racing one another, literally killing one another to get to the ATMs in order to withdraw some money. It's free money. Yes? So it's the same concept when it comes to the system of Abdullah al-Hussein. One tear, a lifetime of transformation. One small, tear, a lifetime change of a path. When it comes to the same path, that's what I'm saying. There has no, rational reasoning behind it. We cannot do the analysis the very same way that we are used to for different things within our life. So when that's the case, I have to get in the habit of being able to exchange every single thing that I do with the Imam al-Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam himself. So which is why a lot of times, again, akhlaqi point, they say it's not good for those who host, or speakers such as myself, to start to thank the ones who stand up and support and do all of the volunteer work. Why? Because the majlis has what we call, the sahib aza. The majlis doesn't belong to me as a speaker. No, it belongs to Imam al-Hussein. And he's the one who's giving out the rewards. Me, yeah, the maximum I can say is thank you, and I can be grateful for all of the efforts and work that, mashallah, the brothers and sisters are putting in, and we can do the prayer. But the actual reward is coming from Abu Abdullah al-Hussein and the position or the status that Allah has given to him, which comes back to our topic, the love of Imam al-Hussein. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about this and constantly reminds us that He does not want anything in return for the 23 years of hard struggle and work of Nabi Rasulullah. Nothing, absolutely nothing, except إِلَّا الْمَوَدَّةَ فِي الْغُرْبَةِ إِلَّا الْمَوَدَّةَ فِي الْغُرْبَةِ. So this is the ayah of the Quran, right? Doesn't want anything except basically taking care of the family of Nabi Rasulullah, taking care of the progeny of Nabi Rasulullah. I mean, how hard it is to make a common sense with this. If any nation has a prophet, has a messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, would they go about and do what we have done with the grandson of the very same prophet? Very simple reasoning. I don't have to bring ayahs of the Quran and the hadith and historical fact. No. If he have a messenger from God, am I going to go against his own grandson? But for what reason? So what happens that after less than literally say 40 years, people change? And when I say people, I don't mean normal people. No, the people who have witnessed Nabi Rasulullah, the people who have seen the miracles, the people who have seen the fazail, they have seen all of these miraculous works of Amir al-Mu'mineen. They had seen the miraculous works of Imam al-Hasan al-Mujtaba alayhi salatu wassalam. They have seen Imam al-Hussein alayhi salatu wassalam growing up. They had seen how the Prophet treated Imam al-Hussein. So what changes? Are people like me and yourself, are we any different than the people who were living at that time? Because it's always easy to run judgment once the time of that event has passed. So right now we're sitting here and we're making a judgment about the people who lived 1400 years ago, and we say, shame on them. But if I was there, would I be on which side? Would I be able to distinguish between haqq and batil? Or no, would I be part of the majority? That's the very key and important question. It's easy to say, yes, I will be on the side of Imam al-Hussein, but it's not really easy if you're put in that position. That's why we always have to have this sense of awareness. Why? Because the dunya, the way it works, and the shaitan, the way it works, it brings about that, that heedlessness, that ghafla, that sense of ignorance. And the sense of ignorance is not something that would say, okay, I'm immune to it. No, it's literally impossible. Even in the field that we are expert, right? Even in the field that we are expert, doesn't matter if I'm an engineer, if I'm a doctor, if I'm let's say, a businessman, if I'm a talaba, if I'm a clergy, it doesn't matter which field. Even in the very same field that I perhaps have a PhD, I have postdoctorate, I'm teaching at the university, at the very same field, we have ignorance. And this is not my saying, this is a beautiful hadith by Nabi Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. In which he talks about ilm or knowledge, and he talks about how it has 27 branches, and out of these 27 branches, only 2 of them it gets completed by when? By the time of the zuhur. Only 2. The rest of the 25 gets completed, inshallah, by the Imam of time after reappearance. So think about it. All of the advancement that we have, all of the technologies and sciences and mashallah, all of the advancement, only two branches or two pieces of the knowledge. The remaining 25, inshallah, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the life, we will witness it after the appearance of Imam of time and through the grace and the blessing of Imam of time, inshallah. So even on the expertise that we have this topic of ignorance. So now let alone if you take a look at the bigger picture. So in a sense, if we realize these facts about ourselves, the more we realize that at the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we're literally nothing. Mathematically, no matter how big of a number we are, if you divide it by infinity, what's the result? Let's say I'm 100, I'm a 200, I'm 1,000, I'm a million, I'm a billion, I'm a gazillion, divided by infinity. What's the result? Big old circle, zero, right? So when it comes to the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have to reach that stage of actually feeling being zero, not just saying it, feeling it. Big difference. You see the difference between the path of Islam and any other path is that Islam talks about submission. With this submission, it talks about weakening the nafs as we speak of. In other approaches, is exact opposite. They talk about how to make the nafs a little bit stronger, more powerful, more be able to do all of this, let's say, miraculous works, the karamat as we speak of. A lot of different approaches that we have is like, okay, what should I do to be able to gain these supernatural powers? Be able to walk on, on water, be able to, go from one, place to another place. Is this the path of Islam? Sometimes, they give it to the people, to specific peoples, but this is not the path. It's actually the exact opposite. So me as an individual, if I look back and I see myself that every day this sense of I is continuously to grow, that means there's something wrong within the way that I'm practicing my faith. The more of the I, the less of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They go in contradiction. It's not possible to have I and Allah within the same nafs. One has to get sacrificed. Which one does it usually get sacrificed? It's not the I, because we have hubbun nafs. Hubbun nafs, again, is something general. It's by default within our nature. Everybody likes their own self. Nobody can say, Sheikh, I do not like myself. No, every single person likes themselves, whether they want it or not. So there has to be, a different factor here to make sure that the sacrifice that takes place, instead of Allah being sacrificed for the sake of the nafs, it will be the nafs that will be sacrificed for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We need that extra element. What is that extra element? That's the topic, and that inshallah we're going to have a discussion. The love of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salatu wassalam. So as we approach the month of Muharram, I'm going to cut this speech a little bit shorter, inshallah. This take a couple of minutes. Brother mentioned a beautiful phrase. As the month of Muharram approaches, automatically by default, the mu'mineen and mu'minat, they tend to feel the sense of sorrow and grief within their heart. They feel the sense of heaviness, as if something is changed. We have staged the month of sorrow and the grief of the Ahlul Bayt. And we know the number one, the Imam of time during this month, has the utmost amount of sorrow and grief and pain within his heart. The more we think about it, automatically the same amount of grief and pain, according to our capabilities, gets transformed to us. That's how mu'mineen and mu'minat are connected, yes? So let's take a moment. Let's think about how, number one, grateful we are to be able to experience the month of Muharram. I'm sure everybody has lost a beloved one who were perhaps among us in the last year, but for Allah's wisdom, they're not here. Alhamdulillah that we've been given a chance to be able to witness another month of Muharram. At the same time, as we come to the month of Muharram, let's take a moment and let's truly grasp the sorrow and the pain of this month. Some of the works, they're very interesting. They last forever. For example, so many people have written books, yes? One book becomes a bestseller for 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, 5 years, 20 years. I'll give you guys one book that you can find it literally in every single Shia's house and on their cell phone. What is that book? It is called Mafatihul Janan, Sheikh Abbas Qumi. Right? One book. Every single person has it. What has he done? What's the difference between this book and all of the other books? Some of the poems, they have the very same qualities. The poem of Muhtasham, usually they have it on the Muharram around, the Hussainiyas. And I know I'm like going towards Farsi a little bit, but it's interesting. What's his story? He used to be a very great poet and used to recite a lot of poetry. But after some time, an incident happens. He loses one of his sons. After losing his son, he starts to, in a sense, not to complain, but he starts to mourn, day in and day out, to the point that he stops reciting poetry, and he keeps on mourning for his son, and he keeps on mourning for losing his loved one, until one night he has a dream of Nabi Rasulullah. Nabi Rasulullah tells him, "O Muhtasham, you have lost one son and you're mourning like this. What should I say?" Then he tells Muhtasham, if you're going to recite a poem, do so for my grandson, Abu Abdullah al-Hussein. So that's when he wakes up, he recites the famous poem that Alam has been changed, as if there is this calamity, there is this transformation, there is this movement within the realm of the existence, and we don't know what is it. Baz in cheshurash ast. What's happening in the alam, what's happening in the realm, what's happening in the world of existence, as if everything is changing. That happens at the beginning of the month of Muharram. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah wa ala al-arwah allati hallat bifanaik alayka minni salam Allah abadan ma baqitu وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر اللهد مني لزيارتكم السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. If you look up, we can see that the caravan of Imam al-Hussein is probably make its way. But look who's coming. It's not only Imam al-Hussein, but he's bringing along his flag bearer, Abul Fazl al-Abbas. If you look closer, you see the one who has the most resemblance to Nabi Rasulullah, Ali al-Akbar. If you look a little closer, you see Imam al-Hussein is bringing along the beloved one, the remaining of his beloved brother, Qasim ibn al-Hasan. If you look a little closer, you see Abdullah ibn al-Hasan. If you look a little bit closer, you see all of the companions. You see Habib, you see Muslim, you see Uwais, you see all of the companions of Imam al-Hussein. But if you look a little bit closer, you hear a cry of Ali and al-Asghar. How much pain and suffering comes with the month of Muharram. Oh, Aba Abdullah al-Hussein, La yawm ka yawmika ya Aba Abdullah. Let's take a moment and say, oh, Imam al-Hussein, we all have gathered around here just for the sake of the love that we have for Imam al-Hussein. Oh, Imam al-Hussein, take our hands on the day of judgment O Imam al-Hussein, not because of what we do, but because of the mercy that you express on the creation of Allah by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. O Imam al-Hussein, take our hands and do shafa'ah for us. O Imam al-Hussein, open the path towards heaven for all of us.
اللهم إنا نسألك وندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم إلهي بحق محمد وعلي وفاطمة والحسن والحسين وتسعة المعصومين من ذرية الحسين يا الله 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 اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج والعافية والنصر واجعلنا من أعوانه وأنصاره اللهم ارحم أمواتنا واشف أمراضنا واجعل عاقبة الأمور خيرا. O Allah will ask you on the right of Imam al-Hussein to hasten the appearance of Imam of time. O Allah will ask you to have mercy upon all of us and upon all of our past ones. O Allah will ask you to provide cure for all of the sick ones. O Allah will ask you to humbly accept this majalis from all of us and express some of the rewards of this majalis to the souls of the marhumin and marhumat, ulama and scholars and maraji. O Allah will ask you to put our path, the path of Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, and to put our dead, the death of Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. O Allah will ask you for the ziyarat of the Ahlul Bayt in this dunya and the benefits of their shafa in the hereafter. رحم الله من قرأ فاتحة مع الصلوات. اللهم صل على